Hi, my name is Bill Ryan, and welcome to my world. This is series number 4 in my Donald J. Trump Can You Hear Me tapes, and what I'd like to talk over today is air. The air that we all need to survive. It is a byproduct of green plants and primarily produced by trees in excess and by plankton. So oceans and forests are extremely important to us as we pollute the waters and cut down all the trees. Air becomes very important. And I don't want to talk in extremely technical terms, so I'm going to be using very simple, pragmatic terminology to keep it simple. And just so everybody understands, in the United States, I have the right to free speech. It is my first constitutional right, and I'm going to exercise it today until these rights are taken away from we Americans. With regards to air, we all on this planet have been lied to continuously. Seems to be an endless vomit coming out of Washington, out of this government. And the unfortunate part is the average person just goes along with it and, okay, well, the government knows what they're doing, and unfortunately, the rest of us suffer. Weather manipulation has been with us since the 40s, after World War II, to the best of my knowledge. You have to just look up different government projects. One is Project Citrus, 1952 hurricane that was artificially enhanced. Storm Fury of 62 through 83 using silver oxide that they put into the atmosphere to enhance storms. They also produced Operation Hard Track, which was sending high density rockets into the upper atmosphere, and which produced a chlorine and bromine gas that's extremely damaging to the atmosphere, and then we end up breathing the stuff. Operation Fishbowl was nuclear testing in the upper atmosphere. This is very bad, and it destroys the ozone. All of this destruction to the ozone and to the planet and to the water, as far as the Club of Rome is concerned, is being blamed on overpopulation, when in fact we have really nothing to do with it. We don't buy our oil from gas from it just doesn't magically appear. The banks who own the oil companies produce it and insist that we all do it, and they quash anything that it won't use oil, because that's how they make their money. Now, straight line clouds have suddenly appeared. And if you talk to the weatherman, oh, we don't have any idea what's causing that. That doesn't seem to make any sense at all. That's really strange that these straight line clouds will suddenly appear in the sky, and it's truly done by an outside source, because that's not a natural thing to have perfectly straight edges on clouds. That just doesn't happen. That's not That's not a normal thing that can occur. And so you have square clouds, angled clouds. It's just not possible. And then in the North Pole, you have ice balls. Ice balls. Lake Michigan had a report that they had another massive attack of these ice balls suddenly appearing on their shore. And there's thousands of them, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of these things suddenly appear. This is clearly not natural and is an attempt to reduce the air temperature by producing these chemical air balls. And they think that's going to lower the global temperature. Operation Popeye is another weather modification. The United States Defense Department declares that weather will be used and as a military weapon, creating earthquakes, volcanoes, using electromagnetic waves. And it's believed that one example is the earthquake that hit Japan. And Japan believes the United States did that deliberately. These electromagnetic waves can be seen, here's a 1997 image, can be seen coming from the South Pole. That alter the air currents. Well, all of this is destroying or damaging the environment that we all live in, and who knows what this electrical activity is doing to the electrical fields of the world. So it's extremely disturbing. And carbon dioxide, which is produced by man, basically, actually, carbon dioxide dioxide is something that's produced naturally when you burn fossil fuels. So if you go back in time, and they do this by unearthing ice, and they can go back hundreds of thousands of years. And basically what happens is the dioxide levels have a pattern like this. And they range from approximately 1.5 to 3 parts per million. And at each one of these times, and this is over hundreds of thousands of years, and each time this is a warming trend, and this is when we have ice ages. So the planet cools and warms up naturally based on volcanic eruptions, forest fires, things of this nature will alter this, but only in that spectrum. Since the Iron Revolution, since the big business thinks that they can just destroy the atmosphere so they can make profits, the levels have turned and crossed. And currently, and I'm talking 5-10 years ago, it was 3.5, and today it's being reported that it's over 4. Matter of fact, it's 407 part per million as of 1917, or I'm sorry, as of 2017. And that's just what they're telling us. So the bad part is, if you look at the chart, it's doing this. It's not curving, it's going straight up. Relentless. And we have never, ever been at that level before. Never. We've never been that high. We don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. It's going to get real hot. And the military knows that because they're already digging bases underground. They're preparing to take care of themselves. All the politicians, oh, they got spaces underground where they're going to live. All the super rich, I guess they're all going to live underground and become moles. I don't know. But how did all this begin? How did the whole thing start? Well, you have to go back in time. But it's always best to go back in time in history to be able to see into the future. And Operation Paperclip in 1945 brought over 1,600 German scientists came to America. What do you think they did? The war didn't end. They just kept right on going. It became the Fourth Reich. They moved right into the government and started experimenting on human beings and doing what wacko German Nazi scientists do, which is basically, I guess, to destroy the world, but definitely to take over. Well, they took over the government without a bullet, without a war. You don't even know it happened, but you know it's happening because of the suppression of knowledge amongst normal people. So, and as far as being able to control and manipulate things, Tesla made the oscillator in 1893, where he could create earthquakes. Well, good heavens. So it's not new. This isn't, oh gee, did Japan just accidentally have an earthquake? You know, come on. It defies logic and reasoning. So the big question is, how does air work? So when you look at the planet and you understand that it's rotating, what it's doing is essentially it's pulling the oxygen, the air that's on the planet. So here's the Earth, and it's rotating this way, and if it weren't rotating, the air would be like this, because it comes from the planets and goes up, and then there's different levels of the atmosphere that's not necessary to go into. And because it's rotating, the atmosphere looks more like this. So what happens is as it turns, it pulls the air that's not moving up here in that direction, and that creates the storms that seem to move across the planet this way, where actually they're just still and being pulled, creating these vortexes and jet streams and things like that. So what happens is you have the air is rotating in these different levels, and above them you have the jet streams that help to manipulate storms. So what's going on is, let's go back in time, and we'll go back in time maybe 1,000,000 years ago. So this column right here represents the atmosphere from the Earth to the upper atmosphere, to the stars. And that's what's circling the planet. So that is the air 1,000,000 years ago. Well, 1,000,000 years ago, there were butterflies that had smaller wings. And when you move into today, this is present day, that same butterfly, the body hasn't changed a bit, but the wings are larger. They had to be larger because there's less air. And what happened to the air? The air turned into carbon dioxide, which filters down, went into the ocean, and it mixes with the water, and destroys the ability for shell creatures to grow their shells. Coral reefs, snails, they can't grow anymore because it's not in the water. What's in the water is pollution. So these effects have been devastating to the planet. And a perfect example is the Great Barrier Reef. In 1985, it was fine. 15 years, or today, present day, no, actually it was 2015, I think, that it was reported that 50% of the Great Barrier Reef is dead in that short amount of time. Well, you could pretty well figure that if things aren't getting better, so it's not going to be that same amount of time before the Great Barrier Reef is completely gone. It's going to be probably half that much time. So 5-7 years, it's going to be completely dead. All that life gone. So what's happening is that perfectly good air is being depleted, and the levels and becoming more polluted. So all of this is filling up with garbage down here, which is where we are, and we have to breathe that stuff. The military jets are flying over and producing all these toxins into the air to try to control the weather and cool the planet. So when I talk about in my one book, I talked about global shading. And global shading is, here you have the planet, and here you have the atmosphere. And the theory was that the jet planes that fly through the air, they produce toxins, they produce jet fuel dioxide, and chemicals that stay in the upper atmosphere. And what happens is when the sun hits those, it reflects off, cooling the planet. So if you went online and looked up global shading, oh, there's no such thing, you're a conspiracy theorist, oh my goodness, it's not something that is even you can't even find this. It's just a silly thought. Don't worry about it. Look the other way. Just move along. So a guy came up with the theory in 2000, and he said he had friends all over the planet that he knew because they were all scientists and they all talked together, and that was his theory. So they kind of said, oh, he's full of beans. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, along came 9/11. George W. Bush, who played his part well in the fake 9/11 incident that pulled us into a war with people that did nothing to us, he grounded all the planes. So all of a sudden, there's no exhaust fumes, there's no pollution going into the upper atmosphere, and guess what? He walked out of his office and saw blue sky. I remember when the sky used to be blue. It was beautiful blue. During the day, you could actually see stars. The sky was that clear. When the sun went down, it was gone for half an hour, and it was still bright out. There was no orange glow. Orange glow is pollution. It was white light coming over the top of the horizon. It was a different time. Today, you're lucky if you can see the sun. It's always gray. The sky isn't blue anymore. It's gray. It's gray because of all these toxins they're putting into the air to reflect the sunlight to cool the planet. But yet the planet is still warming. Something's going on. And what's going on is, like I said, the air is thinner. There isn't as much air. So here's a perfect example. Forgetting weather manipulation, forgetting what the government's doing, let's look at, here's the ocean, and here is a cutaway view of a hurricane. And forgive my art, I'm not the best in the world. So the air is being pulled up into this and dumps out of the top. And this has a circular motion. So a normal hurricane, let's say 20 years ago, normal hurricane would reach altitudes of between 40 and 60,000 feet. So that's pretty big. It's way up there in the upper atmosphere there. It's very tall. Well, you go back a few years and every year we had no hurricanes, no hurricanes. What happened to the hurricanes? We had hurricanes every year. What happened to them? Well, the weatherman is saying, oh, here comes a hurricane out of Africa, and it's heading up towards the United States, but don't worry about it, because wind shear is going to destroy it. And I listened to those words, I said, what? What did you just say? Wind shear? How does wind shear cut off the top of a hurricane? How does that happen? And sure enough, when you look, you see the top of the hurricane being ripped right off. So you're talking these upper atmosphere winds, follow with me, are ripping the top of the hurricanes off, which means you're talking 30,000 feet. That means the air has dropped that much in these different levels. So, you know, we're down here in an area that's thicker and more dense, granted polluted, but the air levels have dropped. The oxygen levels have dropped. And that's why you have wind shear on hurricanes that you never had before. So now you say, well, that doesn't make any sense because one just hit Florida last year. So, you know, that doesn't ring true. Well, again, so now you go back to the planet and you go to the different levels of atmosphere, and you go into the motion of the planet, and what's happened is those levels are dropping, and they're getting less and less as time goes on. So what basically happens is, all right, so the question is, how do you have a hurricane one time and then 10 years of no hurricanes with the tops being blown off? So as I said before, it helps to understand that we live in a fluid environment. The water in the sea is much like the air on the land. There's twists and turns and eddies and high spots and waves and lows, and there's the moon affects the air that we breathe in ways much like the ocean. So at one time you'll have the atmosphere that'll be high, and the next time it'll be low, and then it'll be high as it moves around the planet. And depending upon how it's working at that particular time, a hurricane here won't have a chance because it'll be chopped off. But if it happens at the time when the upper atmosphere is higher, the hurricane will have a very good chance of developing and becoming very strong. But my point that I was making was that even when these hurricanes reach force 4 or 5 and are very powerful, instead of being like Hurricane Andrew, which was very large, they're smaller. They're not as big. They're still powerful. They're just not as big because there isn't the atmosphere for them to grow into. And so what happens is, like the one that just recently happened in Florida, that one in particular crossed an island and a small island and broke apart. I mean, it dropped dramatically in its strength, whereas 20 years ago that wouldn't have happened. That hurricane would have gone over the top of that island and it wouldn't even have noticed it. So that's the difference in the severity. Even though they reach the magnitude of speed in wind, they still lose the volume. They just aren't of the same strength and power that they were 20 years ago. So when you understand that concept, that one time it'll work, one time it won't because of these waves, you get the idea that we're losing this upper atmosphere. Those layers are disappearing, and they're not disappearing, they're dropping down lower. There's less and less air. And I'll give you a good example. I was watching the German news maybe 7-10 years ago, and it reported that a passenger plane was approximately 35,000 feet in the atmosphere. So it would be up here, sailing along, doing just fine, and all of a sudden, the engines shut off, and it went into a nosedive, and it dropped 7,000 feet. So it crossed out of where there was oxygen to run the engines to where there was no oxygen, and it plummets down to the earth, and then they were able to start it up again at 7,000 feet. I thought, wow, that really proves what I'm saying. Let me go online and print it. So the next day I go online, nothing. Not a whisper about this. It fell off the chart. You didn't hear a thing. What they said in the news story, because the German news does a little bit better job of producing the truth than any other news media that I found, and they said the EASA, which is like our FAA, said that the planes that were flying, they told the pilots, well, you just have to not fly so high anymore. You'll have to drop down to 25,000 feet. Really? That's what I need to do? To keep the motors running, I need to come down? Oh, that's what it takes. Okay, so now they're telling pilots you got to drop the height of your plane so that you have the necessary oxygen to be able to run the motors. So if you do a little research, the Guardian produced a news article in '08 where they talked about the oxygen disappearing on the planet. So there's less and less oxygen. And there's lots of information out there about this. There was an article about, I think it was Los Angeles, California, that is in a valley. And that valley fills up with air pollution. Automobiles, factories, people, whatever, it fills up with pollution. And what happens is the oxygen level in that bowl just happens to be between 40 and 60% less oxygen than is found in other places outside of that bowl. And that's true of many cities where the wind just doesn't come along and blow in nice, new, clean, fresh air. It kind of stays there and it gets stagnant and it loses its oxygen. So you have to understand, there's still atmosphere. Even if it's clean, there's still atmosphere. It's just, it'll kill you. You can't see this, you can't smell it, and you just die. Carbon dioxide will kill you. So the other evidence that I came across was there was an article recently that came out, I believe it was June of this year, where the military jets are reporting that their pilots are passing out from lack of oxygen. So they fly very high in the upper atmosphere. They're way up here, scooting around, doing whatever they do up there all day long. And they have what are called onboard oxygen generators. And I guess what they're doing is, because the atmosphere is so thin up there, it's taking what little bit of oxygen they can find and filtering it and filling up a tank so that the pilots can breathe. and not pass out from no air. And apparently, when the pilots come back to Earth and they land and they talk about how they were getting dizzy and passing out because there was no oxygen, the machines are fine. There's nothing wrong with the equipment. The equipment's brand new, and it still can't do the job because there's no oxygen up there for them to get. It's not there. That's why the airplanes are coming out of the skies. That's why these pilots are having problems, and it's more evidence to prove my point that there's less and less air for all of us, and there's more and more carbon dioxide, which is increasing asthma and making us all sick. And to offer one more bit of proof, in biblical times, back when the air was very tall and more heavily oxygenated, you go into even the Bible. So that's just a few thousand years ago, and it recorded cities that were destroyed, supposedly by God. So apparently God did this. When we can't explain something, oh yeah, God did it. Oh, God's mad at these people. Oh, that's what happened. So if you look at where these cities have been reported to have been destroyed and completely wiped out, they follow very, very close to the equator. And so again, now follow that logic. At that time, the planet would have been heavy in oxygen, very thick through this area, would have been heavy, very rich. So a meteor comes along, and if it hits up here, it's not going to do much damage. But if it hits right here, it's got all that oxygen to burn up that meteor. So as it's burning up and breaking up, it gets smaller and smaller, and all it ends up being before it hits the planet is an extremely fast-moving cloud of burning gases. So when it hits the planet, it literally doesn't leave a crater, it eviscerates everything on the land. The whole city would disappear. Of course it would. It was burned. And if you go back in time, and it would be possibly radioactive as well. So it wasn't a nuclear bomb like the space alien theorists think. It was a meteor coming in through this heavy oxygen, and which eviscerated it. And when it hit, it was just a mass of fast-moving gas, super intense heat. And the proof is that buildings that they're unearthing still are partially radioactive, and they were made out of sandstone, and that sand has partially melted and turned into green glass. And that's just super intense heat, but yet the building is still there. So it couldn't have been a bomb that blew things apart. It had to have been just super hot gas that melted that gas, those stone walls. So that supports the fact that the air is literally disappearing before our eyes. The other factor that you have to consider is asthma is increasing throughout the world, and since the year 2000, per the reports I can find, has doubled. So we can all feel it. It's you know, we're not, our lungs aren't right, things don't feel right. We all know this is going on. So you just have to kind of accept that we're using up this air because of the oil consumption, which the oil companies are owned by the banks, and the banks are owned by the Illuminati, and they're owned by 11 families. And they don't want to give up all that profit from the oil. So anybody who comes up with new technology, they kill them. They just, you can't get a patent on that. We won't let you have that. And the patent office is owned by these people. It's all gigantic suppression to enrich these people and crush anybody who tries, and basically exterminate people. They want to reduce the planet by 90% of the population because we're the problem. Yeah, we own the oil companies. Yeah, we did it. We're the ones that stopped new technologies from coming along. Yeah, that was us. When you understand Operation Paperclip, where after World War II, all not all, but almost 2,000 German Nazi scientists came into this country. Well, what do you think they did? You think the Third Reich just ended? No, it became the Fourth Reich. Hitler went to South America and retired and died of old age. He didn't die in Germany by committing suicide. He's down there still laughing about it. And all the Germans moved into the government and they took over. Absolutely, they took over. That's why you have projects like the MKU Ultra, which was done on children. Children, for God's sakes. This is not America. Who are these? It's the German Nazis that were doing this. They did surgical experiments. KX 338 was surgical experiments. Good luck trying to find information on that. There were studies done, one of them on the rat park. The rat park. Behavioral sink. Kind of like the rat race. Well, what these people did was they took rats and they left them in a closed environment and let them to breed, and they got all the food they needed, and let them breed and see what happened to them as a society. And literally, they grew into different segments. So there were packs that were just evil, and they killed the other rats and ate them alive, and just they were horrible rats, very mean rats, kind of like ones that moved into our government. And then there were the pretty rats, the rats that did absolutely nothing but found a safe place to hide and just prune themselves, and they produced nothing. They didn't do it. They didn't even have baby rats. They were too busy looking at themselves in the mirror, putting on their makeup. Sound familiar? So you can see in even this instance, evil always rises to the top. It just is an endless thing that's continuously going on. And the Germans, the ones that have taken over and moved into the Illuminati, which is a satanic, devil-worshipping group of people, they want to kill all of us, and they're doing a bang-up job of it, and they're just going to create an artificial means to enforce martial law, and we're all going to be rounded up and taken to the FEMA death camps, and people that don't produce anything, like myself, an older person, we don't need them anymore, lop off their head. Homeless people, yeah. You're not producing anything, we don't need you. So that's another video. But anyway, that's my concept of air and the direction we're moving. I believe by the year 2024, it'll be extremely obvious that this is what's going on. The temperatures are continuing to rise, and we're reaching a point where they can drop all the artificial snowballs from the atmosphere they want, and it's not going to make any difference. It's just going to keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And all the manipulation in the world isn't going to end this, and they know it, which is why they've built these underground bunkers, these enormous underground facilities for the military and for the ruling parties. I don't know why a politician, or I call them politicians, think that they're going to be able to survive. Because in martial law, we don't need a senator, a congressman, and the camps. The camps are already designed to house them. They think it's for their safety. You better think again, buddy. You're going down. You're one of the first ones that'll be going in there with your head lopped off. We don't need a president anymore. Illuminati is just going to take over. The New World Order is going to be under the UN, and they still are not looking at this weather. They're not looking at the air that's disappearing. And the more it disappears, the hotter it's going to get. And it's going to become real obvious in 6 to 7 years. Very obvious. Sorry to bring you the bad news, but that's the reality. If you stopped today because of the level of carbon dioxide, which is going straight up, it's not going to just magically stop and level off. It won't even curve. It's moving too fast. You're just not going to stop them, and it's going to be really bad. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and I sincerely hope that helps you prepare for what's coming. You have to open up your mind and open up your eyes and look at what's happening. And I'm afraid there's none of it that's any good. Thank you.